Hello, people watching videos about cars on the internet. Welcome to this, my 1974 RA21 Toyota Celica with a 2UZ stuffed into it. If you're new and you'd like to get caught up on the Celica Supra behind me that I'm giving away to one of you, the link is in the video description below on where you can enter to win. Where we last left off, my resident fabric cobbler was in the process of custom fabricating this upgraded rear axle to handle all the additional torque of the 2UZ V8. Going down. I think today's video will answer a lot of questions some of you had in the previous video about this whole situation going on. In the last video, I left out some details that some of you had asked about, and I sometimes forget not everyone watching is an industry professional on this stuff. So when I said the rear axle that I'm putting in this car is a Ford 9-inch, that doesn't actually mean the axle is coming out of a Ford vehicle. There's nothing Ford about this axle other than the initial design, which has been modified to adapt to a TA22 RA22 chassis. Every single part of that axle is from an aftermarket company, and the reason why I didn't use the Toyota rear axle out of the Tundra I think that's kind of self-explanatory, or a different Toyota axle is when it comes to brake options and rear gearing options. There just simply isn't very many out there. That's why I chose this route.
To get a rear axle manufactured to your specific specifications for width and everything else, for a Toyota would have cost 10 times as much as the Ford 9-inch. Not that it can't be done, but there's a billion more options and a billion more companies doing it for a Ford 9-inch.
And just like that, all the pieces are now fabric cobbled onto their permanent homes. Totally just eyeballing this. Undo this guy first. That. Moment of truth. Yeah. Hopefully this still fits. Ooh, I think we're good. Shapes always get me every time. Beefy boy. Ta-da! Da-da-da! It is assembled. Inside this box should be my axle shafts. Yep, they're in there. Oh, the bearings are on them too. Sweet. And of course, I am keeping the OEM lug pattern 4 on 114.3. Gives me better options for classic JDM wheels, which I already have. That's why I chose this to stay with this lug pattern. Now, need to just stick this in here temporarily for... It's pretty much in.
So if you ever order parts for a 9-inch specifically for the wheel end, they're going to ask you for the offset, which is the distance between the wheel mounting surface and this brake mounting surface right here. I'm going to measure the wheel flange right at a 1/2 inch, and then the distance here, which is 2 inches, which is, if you add those two together, it's 2.5. And if you eyeball it from here to here, it's 2.5.
Stay, you floppy face. Drop the nut. This absolutely needs to happen because the wheels come next. So these riv nuts space the flare out just a little bit, which you kind of want. You don't want this thing rubbing against the paint and causing a little corrosion line, and then the rubber is going to fill up this seam. I just hope the rubber can fill that much of a gap. I think it can. I'm going to use a soft hand pad and some 150 grit. Just give this a light scuff for some tooth. What does that smell? My space helmet smells like smoke from the forest fire that was a couple weeks back. I don't want to sand too much because then I'm going to go through the gel coat on here. This stuff is super hard to tell where I'm sanding because it's white gel coat on the white fiberglass. So I'm going to use a little bit of guide coat because I don't want to sand too much on this. You see that sand scratch right there? I'm just trying to get this really nice and smooth and give it some tooth. You see where I'm starting to go through the gel coat right there a little bit? So I gotta be really careful. Yeah, something like that. Make sure there's no more shinies. Now back in land of fabrication shapes, Charlie is playing arts and crafts. What in the back of Grimace's head is that?
That's the shape of the diff. So when I cut this bracket to begin with to try to make it fit this housing, I cut way too much off. See, there's a really big gap here, and there's an even bigger, atrocious gap on the other side, which is not at all acceptable. It's gotta change. So I had him send me a replacement one.
Oh, that's the back of Grimace's head. Okay.
Yeah.
I desperately want to paint that purple.
And now theoretically, this should perfectly match the axle housing.
Next step. This is a part that you couldn't get a kit for. This had to be fabricated from scratch. Not the spring, but where the spring has to sit. It has no home.
So if you look at the factory spring bucket, they're all stamped steel, but they're essentially like a round spot for the spring to sit on and a little raised area to locate the spring so it doesn't slip off. The barbecue shop next door cut these out on the plasma table, and then I spun these up on the lathe. And just like the factory one, it's offset, so it sits kind of half off the axle like this. So this has to sit down further than this. So that's what this dashed line's for right here. I gotta cut it out. Something like that. Add some strength.
Ta-da! Finished product. The little donuts to hold the springs. Everything is welded in place fully. And according to my hair tie, Charlie has approximately 30 minutes to get this thing down to the sandblaster. I'll load it up in your crew cab Mustang.
Who said you need a pickup truck?
And the flares are ready for paint. Go! Wax and grease. Welcome to the following day. My flares and some black epoxy. Thanks to Fred, that's hot. That's super hot. So yesterday, Fred was spraying some black epoxy, and I got lucky because that's what I needed to do on the flares before I put the final coat on. I have to know what this, oh, that's gonna look so fire. Yup, that'll work. It gives it that same kind of vibe the GTV had, the race car back in the day with the black hood. So this right here is a 600 grit asphalt wax pad. That's the technical term. On a Kovacs soft pad. And just knock it out. And just go like this. I don't really have to press very hard, honestly. This is minimal pressure. And I don't need a guide coat because the epoxy is essentially a guide coat. About 60% or so of the stipulation gets knocked down. I don't need to make it completely smooth because it's a single stage satin that's going on it. Clean while you work. So I'm using some SPI matte black. This is not sponsored, just letting you know what I'm using. I shook it for about 15 minutes. That looks good. Depending on the ratio I go with is gonna be how much gloss there is to it. So I'm gonna do a 6:1, should make it nice and satin. So 18 ounces divided by 3 is 6. So that would give me 21 of, okay, so 18. I gotta move you guys out of the booth so I can spray it. I don't want it on the camera. is the result after 2 coats. It's just flashed off now. It's probably dry to the touch mostly, but I'm not gonna chance it. There's like no texture whatsoever. This stuff lays out nice. The axle's drying right now, so I just gotta wait until tomorrow until I can install this stuff. Hello, tomorrow. Ta-da! The finished product. Axle is all coated in epoxy now, 3 coats of it. The axle came with this little bag of robot snacks, and this thing is about to get heavier than I can possibly manage by myself. So the logical, just still really heavy just now, thing to do would be partially assemble it out of the car. I cleaned this thing out super thoroughly before it was epoxy coated with some brake clean and compressed air, but even still on top of that, watch how nasty this is gonna be. Yeah. Aha! This will work. Don't act like you're not impressed. This is a genius idea. Okay. The little studs go in from the back side to the front side. This is the front side, but they go in from the back side. I use a nut to suck these things down. This is kind of a genius design for a pumpkin. Yeah, I finally have a use for these things. Stack those guys on there. A little bit of copper paste to keep things lubed. Time to install. I promise this is the last time you'll ever see me install this axle on camera. I can't squish it enough. Oh, it's so close. There you go. Okay. Woo! Ta-da! It's a diff in a bucket. It was shipped in a box, but inside the box was a bucket, just because it's heavy. It's a diff in a bucket. I ended up going with a 3.9 final drive ratio and an Eaton TrueTrack LSD. Oh, this is, I don't know if I can physically pick this up. This thing weighs a lot. Oh, this thing's heavy. The main reason why I went with this is because of the fact that it's already pre-assembled and I know that the gear lash is gonna be correct. If I did it myself, there's an off chance I could have got it wrong and then I waste a bunch of time pulling it back apart, putting it back together, pulling it apart. This is just guaranteed, warranted, ready to go. I gotta lift this like that with RTV that I can't let dry. So I'm gonna have to, I don't know if I can pick that up. I don't know if there's actually enough room to get this up in there. I might have to take the shocks off and let it hang. I gotta go ask Nardob for some help. This is heavy. Nardob is Brandon backwards. Maybe.
Ready?
Yep. Rotate it. Almost. Aha! Thank you. Just make sure these are all like snug but not torqued. One of these shafts is longer than the other. Oops. So I have to take all this stuff back off again when I put the brake blacking plate. Why can't I say that? Brake backing plate. But for now, I need to measure for tires. So this all needs to go on. Just like that. Again, just doing all this stuff finger tight. The car is not going anywhere. Everything's gonna get adjusted. I gotta adjust all the angles of the rear axle when I get the drive shaft made. I'm not putting the grease seals in because I would end up having to replace them when this all comes apart again through the brakes. I know for people that have common sense, you're like, you get it, but you'd be amazed at some of the comments I get. Thankfully, the vast majority of you watching this right now get it, and that explanation wasn't necessary, but I don't want anyone to be confused. I don't know. Just try and be thoughtful. There we go. So as you would expect, this rear axle is going to weigh a little bit more than the factory one because it is bigger and beefier. And that extra weight counteracts the additional weight up front of the 2U ZV8. It was 126 pounds heavier, that engine, fully dressed, as the 18R. But also sending the battery to the back of the car, and this engine will shave a little bit of that 126 pounds just with some components that are going to be upgraded and replaced on it. It's going to leave this car with, if not the same or slightly better front to rear weight distribution. I'll weigh it once the car is fully assembled, but I'm fairly confident that the balance is going to be on point. And remember, if you want to enter to win the Celica Supra, the link is in the video description below. I'll be working on this thing next probably. So thank you for watching. Bye!